You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 56. Today I'll be talking to Victoria Cassinova. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Victoria Cassinova. Victoria is an artist that's definitely on the rise and someone who I've been really impressed by lately. But perhaps just as interesting as her art is the incredible journey that she's made to get to where she is, which saw her spending months bedridden from a terrible injury. We talk about this super impactful event in her life, how she came out of it with a fresh focus on her art practice, her new solo show opening at ThinkSpace, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Victoria Cassinova. Victoria, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you on.
Thank you. It's cool to do this.
All right, sweet. So let's dive into your background a little bit. And from what I read, you were born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but I know you spent a lot of your life in Southern California. So did you grow up in Louisiana or did you grow up in California?
I was just born in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. And then my mom and my dad moved me to San Diego when I was like 6 months old. So I grew up in Southern California.
Okay. So was that a pretty like rural, urban environment, like where you grew up?
I mean, it was like more inland, like inland San Diego, so more almost like suburban-y, but like apartments. I grew up in apartments. So it was like suburban apartment vibe, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what kind of work did your parents do? Anything like art related?
No. But my mom was always like had a creative side to her. My mom had me when she was 16. She was super young. But my dad has like worked at Trader Joe's like my whole life. So Trader Joe's is like a part of my life. And then my mom is a esthetician and has become a medical esthetician. She's like a master of skin. And she's 45, but you see her and she looks like she's like 23. It's like actually scary, but
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, considering that she had you so young, were you guys like best friends growing up?
Yeah, I mean, there was some of that, but we also just like fought a lot, like
Okay.
like crazy fights, but mother-daughter shenanigans. But yeah, it was interesting. I love my mom, but we definitely would like fight a lot.
Were you exposed much to the arts as a kid? Is it something they brought into the house much?
It wasn't like an artsy family, really. My uncle was like a painter and a drawer, but like, I don't know, I kind of like just took interest in it myself since I was like really little. I remember having this, they had this Bible called Precious Moments, and it had like these little characters in it. And I remember like drawing the characters and like doing like the shading and like, I'm like self-taught. So I would teach myself how to like draw and work with pastels and stuff. So I don't know, I kind of just took on to it myself, and my parents, I think, just like got me the little supplies I wanted or whatever.
So do you think that, were they supportive of your interest in the arts? Is it something that they encouraged in you?
Yeah, 100%. They never like told me, oh, you shouldn't do that because of this or whatever. Like whatever I wanted to do, they were fully behind, which is really cool.
So other than, you said your uncle was into painting and drawing. Did you have any other artistic people around you that you kind of looked up to or were inspired by?
Like when I was younger, no,
Mhm.
not like family, not really, no. It was always just like my own little like weird thing.
So, did you know that like you wanted to become an artist at a young age? Is it something you aspired to already, or were you thinking you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or something?
Oh, I always wanted to be in the arts. I was super into fashion, like clothes and shopping and, like typical girl shit. But well, not typical girl shit, but it was like I was super into fashion, but I was always doing art, always like making stuff since I was young. I never thought like when I was young, oh, I want to be an artist. Like that didn't really set in stone until like my early 20s, which is God, that's so weird to say my early 20s, like Jesus Christ. But um yeah, that I always have had that in my blood, but never saw it as like, oh, this is like a full career thing until I was like 20. But up until then I was like, I'm gonna be a fashion stylist. I had this whole period in high school where I would like ditch school a lot and drive up to LA and network and like work with these modeling agencies and like
Oh wow.
models and style and do photo shoots and stuff and like I would convince boutiques to let me like take their clothes and in return I would give them free photos so they can use as like free e-commerce photos like and I made this like fake contract. I don't know how. I was like 17. Like I was literally 17. I would walk up into these like high-end boutiques and I'm like, "Listen, you need to do this because this is what I'm doing and you're going to love it." And
That's amazing.
they totally let me take like thousands of dollars worth of clothes and haul it over to LA. Meanwhile, my principal's like, "You need to go to school." And I was like, "No." But
So this was in high school you were doing this?
yeah, it was
That's
crazy.
amazing.
I was like full blown like businesswoman, whatever. I was like,
That's incredible. So I read that you studied visual communications. Was it fashion, like more focused on fashion, or I think of illustration when I hear that term. Were you kind of leaning into illustration, or were you still really heavy into fashion?
I was heavy into fashion. So I went to FITM, and visual communications was like a really wide scoping, if that's a word, or like an umbrella like major because we talked about like drafting to like architecture to art history to like creating a window display or how to create visuals for a brand or for a storefront. Um, and then that also included like a lot of like Photoshop stuff and it had like a lot of different things in it. It wasn't like ever specifically art or specifically illustration. It was really like building um how do you like visually communicate a brand or visually communicate a message in general. Um which is like ended up being quite useful and helpful, I guess. But yeah, it wasn't as fashion geared, but like had to do, with some fashion.
But your motivation for studying that was for fashion, right? Is that fair to say that that's what you were aiming for once you got out of school?
Yeah, something like that. Like I remember like I did not want to go to art school because I thought that it would turn like what I loved doing as like a hobby into homework. And
Mm.
I don't know, I was always so against it. Like I was like, I don't want someone to tell me what to like paint or draw because I thought that's what art school was. I had no idea about anything. So I was like, I'm gonna go to like fashion school.
While you were there, were you able to take any like fine art classes just as electives or anything? Just was that part of your
Mm-mm.
curriculum at all?
No, there was like none of that really. I was just like always making art on the side, random things as I went along.
Okay. How did you go about like learning just what you did with paint and drawing? I mean, you said you're self-taught. So like what was your method for just learning your process?
I would like, I just remember, okay, going back early time, I remember being in middle school and making my best friend Jen like sit in front of me, and I would make her sit for hours. And I'd be like, don't move, stop moving. And like, I would make it just so I could draw her face and I would try to get it perfect. But like, it was really an accumulation over time. Like, every time I started on a new little project that I made up, I would always get better. So, like, my process was like, I found a picture that I really liked. And then I'm like, I'm going to make what I'm drawing on this piece of paper look exactly like that. Like, that was like my method. Like, just make what I'm drawing look exactly like what I'm seeing. And so the connection between like my hand and brain and sight kind of like, I was like almost exercising that throughout the years. And then that evolved into like messing around with like paint. I started messing with paint in when I was like a freshman in high school. Because before that I was all drawing pencil and pastel. And then I was like, oh, paint. And then later on that evolved into oil and like just messing around with like a lot of different things. But I was always like into drawing things realistically.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess doing that can also just help you understand light better and shading and all those things that you can later apply once you start developing your own voice, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So like after you finished school, is that when you started working at Urban Outfitters? I know you started working for a number of different fashion companies at that time. Was that right after school?
Yeah, that was like I graduated and then I was styling for All Saints. And then this guy walked in the store and he was like, I would post my little drawings on Instagram. And this was when Instagram was like, it was like 2012. I had, everyone was just starting to get Instagram. And he walked into the store and he was like, I've seen your work on Instagram. I like your drawings. Like you should come work for me. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? How does he know where I work? This is weird. But I ended up like interviewing with him anyways, and he ended up being a vendor for Urban Outfitters, Free People, Anthropology, Forever 21, like a whole array of things. And so I left All Saints and started working like in-house full time, and I was making like 8 to 10 graphics a day. It was insane. But I started designing a bunch for Urban Outfitters, the like men's graphics through this specific vendor and women's. And I was like making like some of their top selling graphics. It was pretty cool. I was like, oh, this is crazy. But
Nice.
and then this other company, Truly Madly Deeply, picked me up, and then I only got to work there for a month, and then I had this crazy freak accident and everything just stopped and changed.
Mm.
But yeah.
So while you were doing the work for these fashion companies, you weren't working for the companies themselves. Like you weren't an employee of Urban Outfitters. It was sort of a design company that Urban Outfitters bought from. Is that?
Yeah, I wasn't working
Okay.
like for, but I was designing like a lot of their graphics for graphic t-shirts.
Okay. Awesome. I mean, how did you like that kind of thing? Just working in a corporate environment or working in sort of a art directed environment?
At the time, I loved it because I was like 21 and I was like, yeah, I have like an office job and I'm doing what I like. I'm designing stuff for brands and stores that I used to shop at. It was cool. It was cool for like my young 20 something self. But at that time, I was like dreaming of like, oh, I want to be in galleries. I want to like be an artist. And so while I would be working there doing graphics, I would go home and like make my art and like do my little thing after that. But yeah, it was cool for like that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you mentioned your accident. I wanted to dive in a little bit about that. But I guess first, is that something that you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2015, I guess you were age 22 at that time. You had what sounds like and had to have been an absolutely terrifying injury that left you bedridden for like a year. And I read that you had fallen out of like a 5-story window of your apartment, resulting in you breaking your spine and like crushing your foot. So I guess walk me through that. Like what happened?
Yeah, so this was at a time I was living in Hollywood. I just got this brand new epic apartment. It had like a brick wall. I had this new job. Everything was like perfect. 22-year-old like LA life. And then I one day locked my keys in my apartment and I told my friends like, wait out front. I'm gonna go like get my keys. And like I climb things. I'm a daredevil, so I like decided to scale the building, but like the outdoor fire escape. And so when I tried to hop through the window to like get my keys because my window was open, I slipped and I fell 5 stories. And so my spine broke in half and my feet were crushed. I had 4 brain traumas and then my pelvis was like, broken in several different places. Um, and so that process, I had to learn how to walk again. They almost had, I was close to having to amputate my right foot because the doctor tried to it was so crushed and put into pieces. They tried to they did this really botched surgery and it ended up creating necrotic tissue. So my foot was starting to turn black. So they're like, we're gonna have to cut that off. And I was like, please don't. But they ended up saving it, which is great. So I have my foot. It's a little beaten up, but it's there and it works. But Yeah, so I had to spend a whole year of learning how to walk again. I was in pain every single day for like 2.5 years. Um, but throughout that whole time, I was using art as like this cathartic tool, or like almost as like a response to loss. It was like I was creating art pieces in order to make sense of like what was like happening to me. Like it became like my own like internal dialogue language, or like a visual diary. Um, and then from there, like once I could walk and I came back to LA because I recovered in San Diego, came back to LA, and that's when I was like full force, like I'm doing art. I'm going to be an artist, 100%.
No, that's amazing. And I did read that like the first hospital that you were at like just completely messed things up, and like you ended up, I think your
Yeah.
mom ended up taking you to a different place after that because they, like you said, you almost lost your leg and they just completely botched a bunch of surgeries. It's just terrible.
Yeah. How did you know that? That's crazy. I don't even know where that info is out there, but that's cool that you know that. But yeah, no, she was like bossing the doctors around. She was like telling them what to do, and like like the whole insurance, American insurance is like
It's terrible.
so horrible. Like the doctors at the hospital, at the first hospital were like, we can't operate on your spine. You're just gonna have to be like crippled. And meanwhile, my spine's like in half, and I'm
Mm,
like how like. And so the insurance wouldn't move me anywhere else because it wasn't in my network. Or
that's so bad.
yeah, my mom was just like a boss and went like literally went around the system, somehow got me to USC Keck Hospital. USC Keck Hospital are like angels and saints. And Dr. Spoonamore put me back together.
Mm.
So yeah, crazy
No,
times.
that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I had L4, L5 like stress fracture years ago. So
Oh
just
my God.
reading about everything that you went through, like it made me sweat. Like I was like just
Yeah.
physically distressed by just reading some of that story. But I mean, I
Yeah.
guess if you think about like the glass half full side of it, like a lot of people don't walk away from some of the stuff that you went through. And so just from that perspective, I imagine it must be incredibly grateful just being on the other side of that. You know, it was a long journey, I'm sure, but a lot of people don't quite walk away as well as you did.
Oh my God, I'm super grateful. Like it's insane. It was weird. It's like I feel like I remember a lot of that time, the healing process, but it just went by so fast. But you don't realize like after you're just sitting and you're like, oh, okay, like I can walk, I can do this, and you look back and you're like, I can't believe that happened. Or like that's it's just weird.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that part of your recovery process, you were using art as a way of kind of getting through that. And I guess, was that hard for you to find your creativity when you were really kind of focusing so hard on healing and just the whole kind of mental exhaustion of what you were going through? Was it difficult to find that creative spark during that time?
It wasn't even like I was looking for a creative spark or like looking for a reason to make something. Like when I was mostly doing drawings and paintings, but it's weird. It's like I wasn't drawing to make a drawing or painting to make a painting. It was like I have this feeling and I need to like let it out. Like one of the pieces I did, it was like this like female figure with a bag over her head that says out of order. And because I felt like I was my body, like I couldn't use my body, and it doesn't have any legs and it's just a walker. And I wrote on the side, I was like, it's part of the plan. I was like trying to figure out all this. So it sounds dramatic, but like at the time I was like, yes. But I was questioning destiny, like this whole idea of like every because I remember like being in the hospital and like going looking through Instagram and seeing a quote that was like everything happens for a reason. And it made me think, I'm like, what like this idea of destiny, like that everything's just planned, everything's like this is just where you're gonna fall into. And so I was questioning, I was like, I don't know if this had to happen. Like how is this part of my destiny? How is this part of the plan? And so I made this like kind of like fuck you drawing to like my situation with like I was like, oh yeah, it's part of the plan. Me like crippled on a walker, and like that was kind of me like almost taking accountability for how I was feeling and like what I was going through, but almost like from the perspective of like almost like this dark satire in a way.
It sounds like a way of like processing grief. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you were going through the stages of grief almost, you know?
Yeah, it was quite literally a response to loss. Like I lost my job, I lost my whole life, I lost a whole group of friends too. I lost my body. Like I couldn't use my body. It's like a whole response to loss is really what that was, but it was cathartic and therapeutic at the same time.
Did it change, I guess, the kind of work that you were making? Like you said, you were working while you were working at for the design companies, you were doing some art on the side. Did you notice a recognizable change in your work after this?
Yeah, like I started focusing a lot more on the body, like drawing a lot more figurative stuff. I was always into like figurative like drawings, but like more so it had just like kind of a darker undertone. Like I started to like come more face to face with like my own darkness. Um and so that came out with like my drawings being a lot more focused on the figure and everything around it kind of being negative space. Like it was always like this sense of isolation. There's been more of a sense of isolation in my drawings since then. If that makes sense. Uh yeah, no, it definitely changed because it became more um a lot more like literal expressions of like my internal climate. Like
Hmm.
if yeah.
And so, I mean, it's kind of crazy the fact that this was what 5 years ago. I guess 7 years. Man, time goes by fast. It's
I know, it's
2022 already.
crazy.
But I mean, it's still a relatively short period. I mean, 7 years ago, that's not a terribly long amount of time. So it's kind of crazy how fast you were able to kind of get back on your feet and start your life over again. I guess looking back, are there any big life lessons that you took away from that whole ordeal?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, definitely a life lesson is like the power of your mind. Like I've realized how important my mindset was because it's when I think in situations like this, I can't speak for everyone, but this is just speaking for myself. It's very easy to adopt the mindset of like being a victim to life. Like shit happens to you and you want to like downward spiral into this doom and into like this why me, why this, and I really worked like every day to overcome that, like overcoming myself or overcoming how easy it was to slip into a depression. Or like I remember my friends coming to visit me in the hospital and I would be so envious of them that they could just come in and like walk around my hospital bed, like feeling that envy for like doing the most simple things. Like I couldn't sit in chairs, I couldn't sit upright for the longest time, or like little things, or like overcoming those emotions, or anything like deeply negative. And I battled with it a lot. It wasn't like, oh, I had this happen to me and like I'm suddenly like awakened and enlightened and everything's okay. Like it was a process. But but having this mindset of like I'm gonna heal, I'm gonna be fine, like just like pushing through. Like I think our bodies respond to our mindset. Like there's definitely a connection with that just energetically and on a spiritual or quantum level. It's our mindset is just so powerful. And I think if I didn't like practice and train myself to focus my attention on what I wanted my future to be, then like a lot of the things that I wanted wouldn't have manifested just
Mm.
physically. So that's definitely a big life lesson from that.
No, and that must have been hard to kind of get to that realization. I don't think that's an obvious thing when you're in the moment. When you're
Yeah.
struggling, when you're going through that, I don't think that's hard to kind of step back and look at it in that way. So it's great that you're able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's where the art came into because it was almost like I made friends with my quote unquote darkness. Like I think like darkness, it can be dark and scary, but like if it depends on how you use it. Like you can use it as a catalyst to see more light, or you can use it as a tool to victimize yourself, or
Mhm.
this and that. And that relationship has become really important to me to this day.
No, that's a great way to look at it. So once you did fully recover and were able to, go back home and start really kind of focusing more on a full work routine, did you go back into the same kind of commercial design work at all, or did you kind of take that time to start really focusing 100% on your personal fine art?
I was focusing honestly 100% on my fine art, just like making stuff because I didn't know what else to do. I was like, and I struggled for like a lot of years after that too, because you don't just come back to LA and decide you want to paint and then suddenly you get gigs and jobs. Like I struggled heavy for a long time. But the commercial stuff and all of that, like, honestly, I don't know how it's like that was like the universe or things just happen. Like I would meet friends who would then pull me into this project, like, oh, you should do this, or like people recommending me or over it's like it happened over time. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna decide to do commercial work now. It's like it all just kind of came to me like over time through different relationships and different circumstances and being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's interesting how that works. But yeah.
Sure, yeah. So let's talk about your work itself. So one of the big kind of motifs that I see, kind of looking through the body of work that you've made for your personal practice, involves a like a scratched out face look with yellow eyes and colored teeth. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that all came from an early series that you created called the Monster Diary series. So tell me a bit about that. Like, how did that come about, and what was your motivation for that series?
So that kind of stemmed from like the whole evolution from my accident. So like after that, when I was doing these bags over the head that said out of order, and that was the first time I was kind of taking away identity or like the face that goes onto the body, because I felt very separated from my own body. So it kind of manifested in this way of like never having like a face. And then throughout time, that relationship between me and my own human condition kind of personified into these monstrous like characters. I'm trying to find another name. I'm still working on finding another name for them because I almost don't want to call them monsters, but they're kind of like these little like personified metaphors of my own human condition. So it could be, you could say it's your inner demons or like your inner something, but it's not all like darkness and like doom. It's none of that. It's like me like these characters are kind of like me taking accountability for my own like situations or the parts of me that are like really deep and buried in, that I then put on canvas or paper, and they become like kind of these like, I don't know, these points in they're all, it's all like a visual diary. It's like these points of reference throughout my life experience. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
no, I think it's good. Well, because I mean, when somebody looks at the work, there's a number of different ways you could kind of interpret that aesthetic. One is that everything else is so really well rendered, but then the face is almost like, if you think back to childhood drawings, when you're drawing like a monster, that's the kind of aesthetic that face looks like. It could be that, or, hey, well, it was a face, but somebody got so frustrated with it that they just scratched it out. That kind of comes to mind. So it evokes a number of different kinds of emotions, just looking at it.
Oh yeah, I've had so many different interpretations. Like I've had like family members think that I was making like demonic or like satanic art, and I'm like, oh my God. Like people interpret it however they want, but I like the idea of like scratching out. I did want to like have this, I like this kind of novelty of something that's really nicely rendered, and then like almost like messing it up in a way with like this horrendous, heinous face or something.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's almost like a vehicle of self-frustration, and like I'm just so frustrated with myself, just that sort of thing. So, I mean, I guess, do you feel that your work is, or do you want your work to be narrative in nature? Like, are you trying to tell a story through the work that you make?
It depends on the piece that I'm making. Sometimes it's just about a feeling. Like I literally named one of my paintings Just a Feeling, because it was like just a mood and a feeling I was having. And then other times I'm talking about specifically something important. Like one piece I have in my show is really talking about the relationship I had with my body and kind of reclaiming my body back. Like that can sometimes have like a certain story in it. That I really want to have, if my work has any power to it, I hope it has enough power to have people interpret their own narratives in it or whatever they might see.
Right on. So one attribute that I've definitely noticed is that the people the figures in your work have an incredible fashion sense. Like they always well dressed. So it makes me wonder, does your previous experience in the fashion industry and your just, personal love of fashion, has that subconsciously or consciously seeped into and influenced the work that you make today?
I think so for sure. I mean, I've always have a love for fashion and clothing, like not in like a shallow, vain way, but more so like in a like this is art. Like clothing can is art, and I find it so interesting. I would pull a lot of inspiration. Like a lot of my work is based off of photography, so I'm very dependent on photography. So whether it's my own photos or photos my friends have taken, and I was super inspired by this photographer, Alicio Belzoni, who's um, a fashion photographer, but he shot for like Virgil Abloh and a lot of different people and just a lot of other things. And a lot of his figures would be like dressed in these really nice suits, and like I got inspiration from that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of times it's pictures of my friends and I paint them and they happen to be wearing something cool. Or this girl, Claudia, I painted a few of her photography works and put my own like spin on it. And a lot of her work has just like cool girls that are like always dressed cool. I don't know. I guess I just fall into that somehow. It's either like dressed really cool or like completely nude and naked.
Right on. So, I mean, I guess as far as like your ideation process and coming up with new ideas, does it start with like a photo shoot, or do you already have kind of an idea of what you want to do, and then you do a photo shoot to kind of capture that in picture?
It's like the most like nebulous thing, like to pinpoint what that the process is, because every time it's like honestly different. Like it's all everything I do is like emotion and feeling based. Like I'll have like a conversation with a friend and they say something and it like sparks off this idea. I'm like, oh, I want to paint that. Like I remember I was talking on the phone with my friend Frankie and I forgot what we were talking about. I was just like hyping him up for some project he did. I was like, this was so dope. Like you did such a good job. And he's like, yeah, talk dirty to my ego. And I was like, ooh, I love that. I'm making a painting off of that. And I made like a little painting off of it. Like, and I named it Talk Dirty to My Ego. Like just little things like that. But like, it depends. Like sometimes I'll listen to a song or see a film and then I get this and I like a whole vision of it and I'll either sketch it or like I have this notes in my phone that has like literally over like 5,000 random thoughts I've had when I'm
Oh,
like
wow.
driving or whatever, and all ideas, just like art ideas that I had. And so, yes, photography is like a part of that because I'll have an idea and then I'm like, oh, I need to like either have a picture of myself or I need to like get my friends together and like ask them if they can do this weird pose for me that I have in mind kind of thing. And then because I wish I could draw and paint completely off of memory, but like I need to have a reference uh, photo, especially with like figures and forms. I need to have a photo to um, copy as I'm drawing or, get the form down. So yeah.
So once you do have a solid idea for a piece, whether it came from a conversation or the notes of 1,000 ideas, do you like what's your next step for like working out your composition? Do you go right into like drawing, or do you work it out in some kind of digital composition, or how do you develop that composition?
I think it depends on the project. So like if I'm doing my pieces, I usually do it through like an iPad sometimes, where I get the scale, like I'll get the digital document in the exact frame size as the canvas, and then I'll draw and sketch it in just to kind of like see. I do have like a methodical approach to it. Like I never go to a blank canvas and immediately just start drawing at it, which I should like experiment with that a lot more. But I'm very like, okay, first I have the idea, it all comes out in this crazy way, but then when I actually execute it, it's like I do it digitally just to see what it looks like in the composition. And then from there, I'm like, okay, this is what it'll look like. And then I start drawing it on the canvas and I have to measure the canvas out and, all
Okay.
that stuff.
Right on. And as far as like the materials that you use, I've seen you use a ton of stuff over the course of your career, from graphite to charcoal, oils, even some acrylics works. So I guess like what goes into your decision of what medium you're going to use when you're working on a particular piece or a particular body of work?
It kind of that's interesting. I never thought about like how I decide that because it's kind of like when I get the idea, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a painting and this is going to be a drawing or this is going to be mixed media. It kind of just like comes along with the idea, but I don't know. I feel like my drawing stuff is a lot more personal for some reason. Those pieces always end up coming out a lot more um like singular. so like the pieces in my show, they're all very like minimal. The not all of them, the drawings are more minimal and more focused. So like usually if I'm talking about something that's more of like a personal narrative, I always go to like drawing for some reason.
Do you think that might
Yeah.
just be because that's what you started with, like as a kid, just drawing, and it's more like personal to you?
Maybe, yeah. You know, drawing is a lot easier for me than painting. Like I love painting, but it doesn't painting is a way more challenging for me than drawing. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, are there any mediums that you'd like to explore someday in the future that you haven't had a chance?
You know, I would maybe a sculpture down the line. I don't know how I would turn that like scratchy monstrous face into like a sculpture. That would be like probably look really weird. But I don't know. I might not even be painting these faces for the rest of my life. Like it's like depends on where I'm at, but I'm open to like anything. Like I'm always trying to learn and grow. So there's like so much more to that I need to learn. Um, so yeah, who knows?
Right on, right on. And so murals is one medium that you've picked up in the last few years, and I think your first mural was in 2019. You did a Maya Angelou based or inspired painting. I guess, how did you first get into doing mural work and public art?
Oh my God, I wanted to do murals so bad for so long. And when my accident happened, I was like, oh, I'm never gonna do that. But then it ended up working out. But I I feel like I just manifested that because so Warren Brand, who has this company, Branded Arts, he met me or I met him at this exhibition called Re-Rise, which I was doing a lot of the portrait work for like the event. And he just invited me on to do a mural for like this next big school project, and it was a bunch of artists coming together at this the Maya Angelou Community High School, and they had like Shepherd Fairey and like 1010 and like all these super dope like muralists, and it was my first mural, and he just threw me into it. It didn't even matter that it was my first mural. Um, and that was cool. There's something really like gratifying about like seeing a big wall and being so intimidated by it. Like I've had so many moments where I'm like, oh God, like what did I get myself into? I'm not gonna be able to do this. It's too big. And then like you finish it and you're like, oh, like it's such a good feeling. Cause for me, murals are like really hard work because I do everything by hand.
Did you use spray paint, or was it like paint with brushes, or what kind of materials did you use?
Yeah, it was all brushes, I hand paint everything. I can't, I've never worked with spray paint and I should probably get more accustomed to that. But I don't know, I like it to look like brushstroke and, like art. Not that spray paint isn't art, but
No, for real. And I think, I mean, you had a learning curve at as it was just doing a mural for the first time, learning can control and all of the things that goes into spray painting. Like, I don't think that would be fair to you to take that on too.
yeah.
I guess Powwow was your next one in 2020. You did Antelope Valley in Lancaster. What was that like, I guess, with your first powwow? And do you think you'll do more of the festival type of mural experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. Powwow, that was really cool. Andrew brought me into that. That was cool because that was the first mural I did where I wasn't asked to like do something. I could just do whatever I wanted to do. And it's the only mural I have with one of my little black scratchy face characters. Um, and I did that in like I think like 4 days, and it went by really fast. But that's probably one of my favorite ones, just because it's like more of like my own personal um, thing. But I would love to do more powwows. Uh, yeah, I never want walls that are like too big because I hand paint them all myself. But like I would love to do another one.
I guess, I mean, you said earlier that once however you come up with the idea, which could be different, your execution tends to be the same for your studio work. Do you approach your mural work differently? Is the process of getting an idea to the wall different if it's for a mural?
Yeah, I think it is. It's way more calculated for me at least. Like I have to get the measurements of the wall and then I create it like in its entirety digitally just so I can see everything. And then I color pick like if I'm doing a mural that's color, like the mural I did for Latasha Harlins in South Central, that was such a process because there were so many colors and the skin pigment. So I color pick and I make sure I have like the right colors because it's a lot of color mixing you have to do. Um, it's a way more it's interesting. It's a more complicated process for me. However, the painting of the mural I get done within like a week to less than a week. But then when I'm working on canvas, I've sometimes have worked on one painting for like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And it's weird how that is. I was talking to my friend about that. We're like, why can we paint murals so fast? But then when we're doing like canvases, it takes us like forever. Like, how does that make sense?
That is weird considering the size difference.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you mentioned the Latasha Harlins Memorial. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. That was that's crazy. I mean, I wasn't familiar with that story until reading about what you did for it. So she was killed at the age of 15, like 30 years ago, and then you were able to work on this memorial for her. I guess, how did you get involved in that project?
Netflix just DM'd me and they were like, can you do, or one of the Netflix people, yeah, I think her name was Vanessa. Super, super amazing team. Like they're just like the nicest, coolest people. They just reached out to me and wanted to tell me about this project. And so then we hopped on email. We talked about it was coinciding with the Netflix documentary, A Love Song for Latasha Harlins, that was directed by Sophia. And I worked, me and the Netflix team and Latasha Harlan's family kind of worked together with like, I wanted to create something that like really embodied like who she was. This was like the first mural that they were going to have, I think, of her at the location. It was at Algin Sutton Recreation, which they now changed to Latasha Harlan's Park recently. But it was the place where her and her cousin and her friends would always hang out. And so it was like really meaningful for them to have this kind of memorial of her through art. And so I worked, it was like a process of like, I wanted to like really understand who she was. I watched the documentary like a bunch of times and I integrated like a lot of things that were kind of, that I hoped shared like who she was. Like on the side, there's like writing and it's like part of a letter that she wrote. And then the other side says, "We Queens," because she used to always be like, she had like this like undeniable confidence and she would tell her friend like we queens, like we're out here, like super
Nice.
for a 15-year-old, super confident. So it's like all these little pieces went into it. But yeah, I went like I dove into like the whole process already. Sorry.
No, that's amazing. And so were you able to spend and interact a lot with her family as you were kind of learning her story?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Like Shinice, I talked with her quite just yeah, we went a little bit like back and forth. I didn't get to talk with them as much through the whole creative process because the Netflix team was sending it to them to like kind of approve and see how they felt about it. And then after like I got to talk a lot more with them and like they came to visit while I was painting and that was like really, really cool. Um and yeah, it was amazing. I met the grandmother when we had like the reveal. It was just the family is like really incredible and it meant a lot to them.
Yeah, I mean, how does that feel? Just, I mean, be able to touch these people's lives in that way. I mean, that's a powerful thing that you were able to be a part of and help create. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's super amazing. I see it more as like I'm just like a vessel to like do this. Like it's bigger than me. It's like it's way bigger than me and it's beyond me. It's cool that I can like paint something and like put it together, but it's like I'm just more so the vessel through which this goal and this respect, which is already deserved, can flow through to in order for the family to like have this memory of someone that was really special. It's like it's super cool to like be able to do that. But it's like I just wanted to contribute something like beyond myself for that.
And so, with this mural, this is not your first or your only social justice focused work that you've done. And social justice definitely seems to be a big focus for you in general, having contributed to several projects over the years, including doing some really awesome portraits for the MLK Now event in 2020. I think you did an AOC one, a James Baldwin one, which is really cool. I guess, how do you get involved with these types of social justice oriented projects? And is it something that you like actively seek out yourself because it's like a cause that you really believe in and are passionate about, or do they come to you and kind of approach you to get involved? Like how do you become a part of it?
It really stemmed from like just the group of friends I have were like a lot of them were activists and a lot of them were just involved in um these spaces, and of course they're like kind of innate beliefs in that I carry as well, like as far as like wanting social justice, equality, like all those things. We have similar beliefs. So you surround yourself with people that are like-minded. So I had a friend, Michael Latt. He was working with United Blackout. He was working with Ryan Coogler and Ava DuVernay, and just a really cool group of people. And he just invited me in to come to New York and create and kind of be like the artist in residence, where I created all those portraits for the event. And that's how I got involved in that. And I just met all these people. It was so incredible. So he kind of pulled me into that. And we had previously met through the Re-Rise exhibition a few years before for mental health. So I kind of, how did that happen? I don't know how that happened, but like, I just somehow always found myself like in these places that I like genuinely like believe in, and like that really mean a lot to me. And then it just kind of all happened through like friendships and like people being like, "Oh, you make sense to be a part of this. Like, come be a part of this." And then that unfolded into eventually people started reaching out to me for things.
Do you like that? Do you like using your art and your talent as a way of sharing your ideals and promoting the causes that you feel passionate about?
Yeah, I do. I think it's like, why not use art as a tool for to influence change or to help get a greater message across? Because I think art is like really has the power of like being this universal language, like how music does, or it's like it can just be used as a tool to support a greater message, and I think that's really really cool, and it's always fun to do that. So yeah.
Okay. And I guess and this is sort of a very ambiguous, broad question, but are you generally hopeful? It's a hard question to answer considering the state of the world. But I mean, looking at all the things that you've been through, like sitting here today, are you hopeful?
I'm like, I almost want to say that I'm like, oftentimes I'm like too optimistic to like a fault, but like I feel like sometimes I'm beyond hopeful where I'm just like, no, I know this is gonna happen. Like I'm like, I'm like very definitive in like what I want to have happen. Or I mean, if you want to say hopeful for the world itself, like in terms of the world, I think that the world is always going to go through like an ebb and flow, and there's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad. And the way our world is, and maybe our society is conditioned, we're really conditioned to like focus on a lot of the bad, but there is always good at the same time. So like at this point, I'm like, I can't control anything going on in the world, but I do always have like an optimism
Hmm.
for that. And then and then my own personal life, I just like am definitive about things. Like I'm like, no, this is gonna happen, or like this is gonna be great. I'm like kind of in my own like bubble head.
I guess for for people that are struggling with remaining hopeful in what are obviously troubling times, like what advice would you have for them? Having been somebody that's gone through so much, just personally, and coming out the other side being super optimistic, you've obviously learned something out of that that maybe other people could learn from.
Yeah, I think a important thing for me has been like, don't let what is and what you're witness like don't let your current reality um poison what can be.
Mm,
Like, don't let what's happening now change your belief in what you can have or what could become. Like, let the becoming become like don't get I sometimes will call it like what is itis. Like you get so focused on everything that is right now, and in this circumstance that just happened, and this feeling that I have, like you get sucked into like right now, but then you have to like step outside of that and realize that like this doesn't have to be forever. Everything's temporary, and things can get like much better. And I've had to battle with that a lot of times, like being in it's being bedridden for like 6 months, not being able to walk. I'm like, I fought myself to overcome this feeling of like, I'm always going to be
mm.
like this. It's always going to be that way. But no, it doesn't. Actually, I would oftentimes just envision myself walking, or like, what does that feel like? Like getting the emotion of what you want to have happen. What does it feel like to be in that place? So like that times are tough right now. They're really tough, and I've been through it and sometimes still go through it, but don't let what is happening now dictate what can happen for you down the line, because anything is possible and things can switch in a matter of like seconds for you sometimes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's powerful. Thank you for that. And so let's talk about your new show. You have a new show opening on March 5th at ThinkSpace called Without Ornament. So I guess what can you tell me about this new body of work?
So this body of work is kind of playing with this idea of ornamental feminism. Like women have always been used, the female body itself has always been used as like an ornamental figure, whether it's in like art or whatever have you. Like there's this quote by Adrienne Edwards that I think is supportive of my show. And she said, ornamental feminism is influenced by the notion of ornamental Black womanhood, which refers to the manner in which Black female bodies are displayed and engaged in art and visual culture as opulent decoration, while simultaneously rendered questionable, suspect, or undervalued. So in my show, I'm kind of playing with like half of my work is these drawings that are really like, they're mostly nudes and mostly just like minimal. And that's, to me, is like the without ornament, like that's like kind of things being stripped down. And then some of my paintings have a little bit more of like these, like there's this one piece with three girls and they're all in this pink background and they're wearing these cute little outfits. It's almost like that ornamental figure. It's like with ornament and without ornament, like the absence and the presence of this idea of ornamental feminism within my work, all while talking about my own personal narratives through that.
Nice. So, I mean, the with and without kind of division, it sounds like it's divided with medium as well. So like all the without ornament is charcoal and graphite. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. There's one painting that kind of have one piece in it, that painting that kind of falls into like the without ornament aspect. But for the most part, yeah.
Very cool. So I guess when you're developing a theme for a show like this, do you tend to develop the theme up front and then kind of work within those boundaries, or do you just start working and then seeing where the work goes and then define the theme afterwards?
You know, this time I it's always a feeling. I got the idea and it was like this like super strong gut feeling in me that it was like, this is what I want to do. It came from my cousin speaks French or like can speak a little bit of French, and there's this word, I think I might be saying it wrong. It's like dépouiller, which means like to be stripped down or stripped away, like without ornament. And I was like, oh, that's what I want. And then I watched this documentary with Audrey Hepburn and she mentioned that word too. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, because this makes sense and is in line with like kind of where I'm at just in that year alone as like a woman and as through the experiences I've had. So yeah, that kind of just came about, like it just came to me.
Very cool. Is there a particular piece in the show that challenged you maybe more than some of the others did?
Yeah, there's this drawing I did. It was a drawing and painting. So one of the drawings I did, it's like 6 feet tall by like 4 feet wide. And I just wanted to see how big I could draw something. Like I want to like push my drawing skills to the limit. And it's huge. It's the biggest drawing I've ever done, all with pencil. And that was a really, really big challenge for me, just like skill wise. And then this other painting I did with a girl in a motorcycle, that was also challenging for me. I love painting motorcycles, and I don't know why I have like such a thing with like pairing this like super masculine like object with like this feminine, I don't know, figure. So in this painting I did, it's a girl on this Harley Davidson, but she's like in a wedding dress and a beautiful veil, and there's like roses. Nice. And I don't know, but that was challenging. For some reason, painting and drawing inanimate objects is like really difficult for me. But yeah.
Do you ride motorcycles yourself?
No, but my brother does. He like races them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So how many pieces are there going to be?
10 pieces. I still have 2 more to go to make 10, but
okay. So you're still working on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have like no time. I gotta get it going.
Very cool. Well, people can definitely check this out. The Saturday after this show is supposed to debut is when the show opens. So it's March 5th. I guess we talked a lot about the different types of work that you do. Your personal practice, the social justice oriented work that you've worked on, and then a lot of the commercial work that you've done over the years with Time Magazine. You did a Pixar Soul poster, which is amazing. I love that movie. Amazing soundtrack too. I guess between all of those types of work, is there what's the right mix of personal versus commercial work for you to be kind of satisfied?
I mean, I don't know. There was like a one point this one year where I was so busy and I was getting so many different I guess commercial projects, and I was like, oh, I don't have any time to make my art, and I'm not growing as a artist in the fine art realm. And then the commercial stuff started slowing down, and then I had more time to make art, and then when I had more time to make my art, then I was like, shoot, I'm not being busy. I need to get where it's every time I get one thing, then the other thing falls, and then I get the other thing and the other thing. It's so weird because I'm kind of a workaholic and I always like to be busy. But I feel pretty good with my balance now because I've done I love doing commercial work, and I think that's where a lot of the whole visual communication era of my evolution kind of stems from, is I love supporting a brand, or amplifying a brand through art, through the power of visual communications. But this year, with my show, I have a show I'm doing in Hong Kong this year, and then another in Dubai with Think Space 2. So that's really cool. I'm really excited to expand my personal work in that realm. And then, throughout the year, still be able to do some other stuff. So I think it's hard to define exactly that balance, as long as I can have time to paint and be able to do the other stuff, because I can't control when the projects or commercials or brands want to work with me. It's that's also up in the air.
So, I mean, it sounds like you have an exciting year ahead of you. You have, your new show in the week of this show coming out. You said you have a Hong Kong show and then the show in Dubai. Where can people stay up to date with the latest to follow these things that you get coming out?
Honestly, probably just my Instagram, because that's where I'm the most active, or my website. I post everything on my website, but the most immediate up to date things are always on my Instagram or my stories, stuff like that.
Awesome. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Ooh, there's so many. Oh my God.
I told you I wouldn't throw you a curveball, but I threw you a curveball. Sorry.
But whose work that I'm super fascinated by is Ian Francis. Do you know his work?
The name doesn't ring a bell. No.
Look him up. His work is just super cool and weird and interesting, but just cool. He does it's almost it's all oil paint, but it's it looks like it's this digital influence to it, and it's his paintings makes you feel like you're transitioning from dimension to dimension and breaking the simulation.
Nice.
I don't know. I think his process is cool. I think he's from the UK. I don't know, but it's super cool. I would be fascinated to hear what is going on in his head.
Awesome. No, that's a great suggestion. I'll definitely check him out. Victoria, thank you so much for doing the show. This has really been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's fun for me too.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Victoria. I really liked what Victoria had to say about, not getting too dragged down by the difficulty of your current circumstances, to the point where you're unable to imagine what you're ultimately capable of. And for her to come to that realization in the midst of her own, traumatic struggle is pretty incredible. It's really hard to see that sort of thing in the moment when it's happening. And like I was telling her, I actually suffered a stress fracture in my L4 and L5 vertebrae, 7 or 8 years ago. And it made me physically sweat just reading all that she went through while I was doing my research on her. And I guess I'm just in awe of her strength and her ability to, continue to remain hopeful and optimistic. Her new show sounds really cool. I really like the way that the show is divided into these two groups, with and without ornament, talking about this idea of ornamental feminism. And that Adrian Edwards quote that she mentioned was pretty profound. The show opens at ThinkSpace on March 5th, the Saturday after this episode should debut. Definitely reach out to the gallery if you'd like to see a preview of the show, or even better, subscribe to their newsletter. And of course, follow Victoria's Instagram as well to stay up to date with all the cool stuff she has going on this year. It seemed like she had a really full year ahead of her. So thanks again to Victoria for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairespodcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairespodcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.